right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the House Insurance Committee. Today we have an action-packed, thrilling adventure where we're going to take our final action on HB 2087. But before we get to that point, Representative Neighbor has a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to go ahead and clear the minutes for the meeting of January 27th, 2005. Say what a great job our OA has done, or our secretary. And with that, I would move approval of the minutes for January 27th, 2025.
And I would concur, those are legendary minutes. Do I have a second? Second by Representative Haskins. Discussion on the approved minutes, or the non-approved yet minutes that are also legendary. Pendingly approved minutes that are legendary. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Very good. Minutes are approved. Now, let's turn our attention to the bill that we heard last, Monday? Just on Monday, by golly. Seems like only 2 days ago. HB 2087. If you could refresh our memories, Eileen, that would be fantastic.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 2087 was the bill that would authorize certain non-admitted insurers or surplus line insurers in common parlance to transact business in the state of Kansas. And we did a lot of cleanup and name change stuff in the bill, but the primary portion of the bill was to allow those insurers to insure auto dealers.
Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move for the purpose of discussion that we pass out House Bill 2087 favorable.
All right, do I have a second? Second. Representative James jumps in with a loud verbal. He's good to go. All right. Is there discussion on HB 2087? This was, as you'll recall, committee, we discussed surplus lines. Lloyd's of London was referenced as probably 50% of the surplus lines market. Taylor's, we, of course, being in Kansas City just prior to the Super Bowl, Taylor Swift had to be mentioned, and I think she's been mentioned in every committee this week. There we go. And again. All right, is there any further discussion on HB 2087? All right, seeing none. I would, it's already been moved. All those in favor say aye. Would you like me to close? Oh, you can close on your amendment or on your motion if you'd like. Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I close.
It sounds like you have support.
I close on my motion. Thank you.
Very good. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. All right, HB 2087 is passed out of committee, and I appreciate your work, committee. All right, now the only thing left to do today is a hearing on a very easy, calm HB 2128. And to get us up to speed on that, come on, Eileen. Oh, you know you love it. I did kind of, okay, in fairness, I kind of dropped this one on Eileen a little quickly, so she's a little
Miffed.
Frustrated at me, and it's valid. It is valid.
Honestly, you guys, if you know, like when you have an accreditation bill that has bits and pieces that the department asks for and then drops like chunks of new material from a model act into our statutes, it makes it really hard to organize a brief. So having said that, I'm going to depart from my normal briefing practice of going in order section by section and just kind of jump around a little bit. You'll see why in a second. But primarily, the bill adds the group capital calculation and liquidity stress test requirement. Those are from the NAIC Model Act, and we're going to add that to our Insurance Holding Company Act. So having said that, Section 4 of the bill amends KSA 403302, and we add the definitions of financial analysis handbook and group capital calculation instructions, NAIC liquidity stress test framework, and scope criteria. And again, I'm going to do a high-level overview because, wow, some of this stuff is really technical, and this gentleman here to my left is just begging for the opportunity to explain the technical details of the bill to you. Section 5 amends KSA 40-3305, and it clarifies the registration requirement for insurers of the Insurance Holding Company Act. This section also requires the ultimate controlling person, that's me, generally speaking, the ultimate controlling person of every insurer to file an annual group capital calculation with the insurer's registration. The section also provides for certain exemptions to the filing the group calculation report and gives the lead state commissioner the discretion to exempt certain insurers from the filing. This section would also require that the ultimate controlling person of every insurer scoped into the NAIC liquidity stress test framework file the results of a specific year's liquidity stress test. See? It's getting hard here. Section 6 authorizes the commissioner to require an insurer that the commissioner deems to be in a hazardous financial condition to secure and maintain a deposit or bond for the duration of the contract or agreement, or for the existence of the condition for which the commissioner required the bond. This section also makes all records and data of an insurer held by an affiliate to remain the property of the insurer and be segregated from other records and data at no additional cost to the insurer. Section 7 of the bill would authorize the commissioner to examine any registered insurer and the insurer's affiliates to ascertain their financial condition, including the enterprise risk to the insurer by the ultimate controlling person, or by any entity or by the insurance holding company as a whole. Section 8 of the bill states that the information reported and provided to the commissioner pursuant to the act would be confidential, and that the commissioner has the responsibility to maintain that confidentiality of the information. The bill also amends the definition of health organization within KSA 40-2D01 to allow an organization that's licensed as a life and health insurer, but that primarily reports health lines of insurance, to file an RBC report for managed care organizations rather than just the standard RBC report. Lastly, the group capital calculation and liquidity stress test framework require determination of which instructions, calculations, and documents are in effect at any given time. So this bill would authorize the commissioner to select the version that would be in effect and announce that version of the instructions, calculations, and documents for the upcoming year, and cause that announcement to be published in the Kansas Register not later than December 1st for the upcoming year. And if it sounds familiar, it's because that's the approach we took to the lowering fees bill. So we've also used the same approach to the problem of needing that annual date change bill for RBC risk instructions. So that's another item that would be in the announcement made by the commissioner and published in the register. The definitions that we've addressed this way are RBC instructions for managed care organizations, financial analysis handbook, group capital calculation instructions, and NAIC liquidity stress test framework. The authorization to make the selection and announce that version of calculations, instructions, and other documents appears in section 1 of the bill in subsection A. Subsection B just kind of gives a listing that we say calculations and instructions include these items, and we fully anticipate that items are going to have to be added, throughout the upcoming years, and by adding that there, we again would avoid an unlawful delegation of authority and allow the commissioner to select those versions. And with that, Mr. Chair, I can stand for questions.
Excellent. Committee, you'll note, for those of you who have been on this committee for a while, every year we have to do the date change bill. this may be the solution where we're not going to have to do the date change bill every single year. I'm kind of excited about that, to tell you the truth. Yes, Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now that you brought that up, will we still have that bill come before us this year? Because we haven't seen it yet. Or is it included in this?
The fix is in this bill, so
In this
hopefully
bill.
this bill gets enacted, and it would take care of the issue for this year.
That's answered a lot of questions for a lot of people. Thank you.
Why there wasn't a date change bill yet this year?
It's one that we all wait for.
You know, it's my favorite bill to draft every year, so.
There's some concern about the number of shells that we'll be able to generate in this committee.
I think we're plenty covered with shells, Mr. Chair, judging by the number of bills I've drafted this session.
I do believe Eric is always there to help us out on that regard. All right, committee, further questions for Eileen? All right,
Don't let me, you want him.
I think you're off the hook.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Excellent. All right, I have no one listed as a proponent, but I'm going to go ahead and make the assumption that Eric Turek, as he submitted testimony, would also like to appear as a proponent for HB, whatever we're on, 2128. Welcome to committee, Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Eric Turek from the Kansas Department of Insurance. This is the revisor did a great job of explaining the contents of the bill. This is quite a complicated bill that gets very much into the weeds of financial analysis and examination, and the laws currently in place in statute concerning it ultimately amends the Insurance Holding Company Act, and I'll get into that. But first, I want to describe for the committee one of the main reasons why the Department of Insurance exists in Kansas. Of course, we license insurance agents. Of course, we investigate and handle consumer complaints. Of course, we license insurance companies as well. And ensure that all laws and regulations are followed, but chiefly, we ensure that the insurance companies have enough capital on hand so that they can pay claims in the event that claims are submitted to them. The Department of Insurance and every Department of Insurance across the country, they ensure that the necessary capital is on hand through the financial examination process. And so that involves our examiners and our analysts going through on anywhere from a 3 to 5 year basis of doing a deep dive on the books of domestic insurance companies, and then a quarterly, semi-annual, and annual process of conducting analysis. We have 42 domestic insurance companies in Kansas. They may be doing business elsewhere, but chiefly they're domiciled here. Those are the companies that we are responsible for examining and analyzing. There are also 1,600 foreign insurance companies doing business here as well. Through the National Association of Insurance Commissioners and the accreditation process outlined through the National Association, we ultimately trust the work of other insurance departments to ensure that their insurance companies are solvent and that they have the necessary capital to pay claims, as we rely on their work, and they rely on our work for our 42 domestic companies. So I hope that's relatively clear. So the majority of this bill is required for that accreditation purpose. Kansas is up for accreditation in 2026. There are some aspects of this bill that every single state and every single state, DC, and the 5 inhabited territories, they're going to have to pass this in order to meet accreditation muster. I'll first talk about the date change bill. The Department of Insurance has introduced a bill every single year for the past 31 years, changing the date, referencing the risk-based capital instructions. Those are the instructions promulgated by the NAIC that require companies have a certain level of capital based on their risk profile and things like that. Working with the revisor on a permanent solution, so that way we do not have to bring forth this bill every year. The bill would require that the commissioner publish which version of the instructions are to be utilized by Kansas insurance companies. So after once the commissioner will be required to publish that in the register. Secondly, I know that the revisor first started in her explanation. She first started talking about two tools that regulators across the country will soon start to use. That is group capital calculation and liquidity stress testing. As the nature of insurance evolves, sometimes so does the business structure of insurance evolves as well. So I would say roughly maybe half of insurance companies across the country are managed or owned by an insurance holding company. And as that takes place, assets get a little bit more complicated. It's a little bit harder to ascertain the financial vulnerabilities of an insurance company, how much capital they actually have on hand when their investments are not just traditional stocks and bonds. So those two tools ultimately empower the department to make sure that we can ensure that the companies have enough capital to keep paying claims. Third aspect I want to talk about this bill, it repeals 40-249. This is a statute that was enacted and has not been changed since 1927. And it requires insurance companies that are admitted to do business in Kansas to start selling policies within 2 years. In our experience, not every single company, for a variety of reasons, may not sell policies within the first 2 years of establishing themselves here. Perhaps they are bidding on the Medicaid contract. Perhaps they are figuring other things out. But currently, because of this Great Depression era statute, companies, they must dissolve, and then they must reapply for their admissions to do business here. It's more work for us. It's more work for the company. This, to us, is completely non-controversial. And lastly, I want to talk about what Eileen started to mention, which was life insurance companies and health insurance. And so what we have, regardless, or not regardless, when companies organize and they apply to do business here, they must organize as a specific type of company. So either a life company, a health company, a property and casualty company. What we find is that sometimes there's some so while they may be organized as a life company, they may also predominantly sell health insurance products. And so if that's the case, we want to give those companies the flexibility to use the health insurance company-based financial statements when they provide those to the department. So it's really just providing flexibility to insurance companies who are life companies, but they sell health insurance products also. So, Mr. Chairman, I threw a lot at you. I'm very happy to stand for questions.
All right, very good. Thank you for that, too. First off, committee, I do want to clarify just a couple of things. The 1927 law being repealed, I had no hand in that whatsoever. It came into effect just before I got here. Also, I saw some blood pressure and eyebrows both raising. Eric, I want to clarify, when you said foreign insurance companies, you mean out of state, not out of country. Is that correct?
So industry terms, I apologize, Mr. Chairman. So domestic companies are headquartered here in Kansas. Foreign companies are headquartered somewhere else, but they still do business here in Kansas, and they have to apply to do business here.
Absolutely. I just wanted to clarify that. Didn't want anyone getting tense about the, TikTok insurance or whatever we might be dealing with here. You know, that's going around. All right. Questions for Eric, committee? Yes, Vice Chair Bergkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Eric, for being here. Just a few questions more, just for my knowledge. How many examiners do you guys have doing these audits?
Yeah, great question. And part of the accreditation requirements is not just statutory changes. Like in this bill, it is maintaining a certain number of examiners on staff and analysts. I think that we may have 3 examiners on staff. I know that we do contract with firms as well to so that when we do examine companies, whatever help that we need, we ultimately get. We definitely have more examiners than, more analysts than examiners. Yeah.
And then, so like when you do these audits, is there somebody that is ensuring you're doing it properly and is that NAIC, or is there a federal agency that ensures that you're following proper protocol?
Absolutely, yes. It's the NAIC, so not NAIC, it's the NAIC, it's the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. So during the accreditation process, which takes place every 6 years, and every department of insurance across the country goes through a rigorous process where the other departments, they look at all of the work that's done, including the audits or examinations, and they ultimately hold us accountable to make sure that that the Department of Insurance here in Kansas is doing the accurate and necessary work when it comes to the examinations.
Thank you.
All right, committee, further questions? Representative Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Eric, excellent report. Do you have a couple questions? You know, I do know the insurance industry has been under sort of a lot of stress, actually. I mean, claims have been extremely high, if I understand it correctly. So how much have you, I guess my question would be, so are the background percentages changing as far as to raise their financial solvency, or is it still, how does that, you know, calculated by your regulatory agency?
I think I understand your question. Is your question more or less, how do we identify how much they need on
If I
hand?
can, yeah, no, I mean, I know like banks, the stress test, I believe has gone up over the years just because there's more financial risk. Is that the same true for insurance companies? It keeps going up? I mean, how, you know, where's it heading?
So I'll profess I'm not familiar with a lot of the banking structures and who owns banks and whatnot, but what I'll say is that ultimately, we want to ensure that the companies can withstand financial stress. And in an age where many companies are owned by parent companies and business structures can be very complex, in addition, when you have insurance company in Kansas, and then you also have the same insurance company, a subsidiary or a sister company or parent company in another state under the same name, you know, so structures can be very, very complicated when it comes to a business. In addition to their assets can be very creative. I think I said earlier, it's not just identifying their assets and the value of their assets in stocks and bonds. It can be quite very creative that I'd be happy to go into more detail offline.
So you know, there's 42 insurance companies in Kansas. When was the last time one went bankrupt? I mean, how often do you have somebody actually go under?
Great question. I'll have to get back to you on that. What I will say is that in the event that a company does go bankrupt, there is a guarantee association as a kind of a safety net. It's kind of similar to the FDIC. I hate making that comparison, but that's the most simple comparison that I can make for policyholders when they do have outstanding claims, but the company that they had the policy with is bankrupt, so there is a fail-safe for them. I can get you the exact answer after talking with my department, but the states work very, very closely with ensuring that companies stay afloat, and we do intervene when necessary before we get there, so rehabilitation, things like that.
You keep saying. Fire away.
So do you have, I mean, and well, this may be a follow-up question, but as far as, is it a question that the insurance company has miscalculated the risk, or how often is it like just fraud? Like somebody is like really trying to run a scam or something? I mean, I take it there's plenty of safeguards on that. It just must always be related to just, you know, selling policies and not calculating the risk correctly, or do you have a notion on that?
I think some people were coughing at the beginning, so I wasn't able to hear the first part of that question. So I may need you to restate it one more time. So fraud. You were talking about fraud. So are you talking about more at the company level, or more at the individual level, or do you want me to talk about more about how a company actually becomes admitted into Kansas? I don't know if that'll answer your question.
No, it was more of the problems that you guys ever have, and maybe this is just part of your follow-up, is how much of it is ever related to, you know, purposely, you know, some company trying to, you know, manipulate versus somebody just getting caught in the worst possible situation. You know, they just miscalculated, you know, their risk with what they were charging, and so then they're upside down on claims versus income.
Yeah, so it definitely does happen sometimes where, so insurance companies do need to set their premium rates to a certain rate to ensure that they can stay afloat. We do know that there are some times when companies purposefully change their premium rates and which can long-term possibly damage their financial health. I might be able to answer your question more offline. I think we're talking past each other a little bit, but yeah.
All right, Representative Bergkamp for a second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That you kind of spurred just a question. Do you have a similar report to like what the Kansas Bankers Commission does, where they say, you know, these banks are healthy, like these insurance companies are healthy, but then here's one or two that are kind of on the watch list? Or I just out of curiosity.
Sure. So I don't know if we necessarily, so I think that an executive summary of our examinations are available online. What I'll say is that we have several tools at our disposal to ensure that for companies that may not be in the best financial health, we can exert more supervision over them to ensure that they can get over the hurdle. While companies that are sound and healthy, it's discretionary in terms of how much supervision we exert. We have tools like rehabilitation. We can force a company into rehabilitation if they have gone down a financially irresponsible path for whatever reason. And sometimes it's not solely due to the insurance company's decisions to, sometimes the market factors. If there's a surge in claims out of nowhere beyond anyone's prediction, that can lead to things like that too.
Thank you.
All right, Representative Meyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony, Eric, and trying to explain this really complicated bill. I'm not sure I totally get it, but am I correct in remembering that through your testimony you stated that if this bill is not passed, that we risk not being able to be accredited as a Kansas Department of Insurance?
Thank you, Representative, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so let me recap the accreditation process again. So there are 56 insurance departments across the country, one for each state, DC, and the 5 inhabited territories. Each department is responsible for the financial examination of their own domestic companies, as we are responsible for the financial examination of and analysis of our 42 domestics. And so again, we at the Kansas Department of Insurance, we are relying on Missouri's. So a Missouri company may sell policies in Kansas, right? But we are focused on examining our own domestic companies, and we rely on the work on the Missouri Department of Insurance. And we're trusting that they are monitoring their solvency, their finances, and things like that. So, and this is a standard accreditation item across industries. That's really how accreditation works. But and maybe I shouldn't have mentioned Missouri as an example. But so feasibly, it would just not be possible to examine and ensure complete solvency on all the companies that are doing business here. I think also further that the companies doing business here wouldn't really appreciate or like several jurisdictions coming in and looking at their finances. I know that the examination process, it's not cheap when I think the companies have to hire staff to work on this too. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question.
No, I mean, kind of, mostly. I don't know. It seemed like a simple question, but not very simple answer, which is understandable. So what would happen then if for some reason we did not pass this bill and Kansas was not able to sit for accreditation in 2026?
Sure. So we would lose, it's very possible that we could lose our accreditation standing with the NEIC, and what would happen is that our 42 domestic insurance companies would be subject to discretionary examinations from other states. So the Nebraska Department of Insurance, because our accreditation is not valid, the Nebraska Department of Insurance can come examine the company. And let me be clear, there's nothing stopping them from doing that right now. If there is a serious concern about one of our domestics' financial well-being, but the accreditation, maintaining accreditation is more or less keeping there's a trust amongst departments of insurance. What I'll say is that without Kansas earning its accreditation, and we are up for accreditation in 2026, other departments of insurance could come in and examine the domestic companies here. I think that they would have to, each one of them would have to hire more staff. I might, well, and it looks like some of the members of the representatives of the industry aren't in the room, but I think that they definitely would do and advocate for, do what they can and advocate for anything that can help move us towards and maintain accreditation.
Thank you. So in the case, for some reason, that this didn't pass and we were stuck in a situation where other states were able to come in and do what you just said, basically, how much would that cost the state, approximately, ballpark?
I don't think that this necessarily, I don't think that the lack of accreditation would necessarily incur additional costs to the state. It's primarily on the companies that are domiciled here.
Would that not then trickle down to like people in the state and things like that is what I'm getting at?
It very well could be. Yep, or it very well could.
All right, Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Eric, do you expect any more changes to come down from NIAC that to improve the accreditation process that we have not incorporated in our system at this time, or are those changes going on right now and they'll be brought to us? Just an overall view.
Yeah, happy to answer that question. So the two new regulatory tools that are required for accreditation, so the group capital calculation and the liquidity stress testing, I think that those are tools that commissioners across the country have been discussing since the financial crisis in the late 2000s, and these are products of those. The Insurance Holding Company Act is already in statute now, and these are just amendments to the act. I think over time, and I may have said this at the beginning of my testimony, and I apologize if I didn't, but as the insurance landscape changes, regulation has to change over time, and what is a trend is that insurance companies are being purchased and owned by holding companies. And again, their own business structures can be relatively complicated. Sometimes a holding company can own or possess multiple insurance companies, and we have to work with other states on examinations of those companies in that involved in the insurance holding company structure. So short answer is, over time, new accreditation standards are going to have to be met. The accreditation schedule is more or less on a 6-year period. I think it's a little bit shorter if states have a track record of not complying with accreditation standards, again, statutory or not statutory.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Representative Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First question for you, has your testimony changed at all considering the chair is wearing his mad scientist coat? That's not really the question, but he called me Hawkins, so I had to go with that. I love the idea of efficiency and grouping up, and even though I enjoy this committee and coming together to change the dates on the bills, seems to be not necessary. But we had a similar discussion in higher ed budget about how can we make it a little bit more efficient. And it feels like we're giving you or the insurance commissioner a lot of autonomy on making these changes. Like, and what did you discuss as far as why this is, I don't know how, I know you've answered it, but it's like, what am I missing out on? It's like, there is some benefits for us to always look at bills every year to make sure for accountability. Are we going to lose any of that with this process? And
I'm assuming you're mostly referencing the date change bill?
You pick a date, I pick a date, yeah.
And I might look to the reviser for some assistance here. So, and every year, so the risk-based capital instructions, that's what the date change bill is about. Those are, I'm simplifying this a little bit, but it more or less creates and establishes the bare minimum of capital that companies have to have on hand. So a life insurance company with this profile has to have this much capital on hand, a P&C company this. It's quite complicated, and because it's, and I'll look to the reviser again, because it's not a government entity that is setting these guidelines, the legislature or some elected individual has to set those guidelines for that year. The NEIC updates those every single year, and so that's why there's been 31 bills. You know, ultimately, I'll say this, if the legislature believes that
You answered the question by the fact that these dates, we're just doing what our accreditors are asking us to do. And so it's really, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
All right, and I believe Eileen has a little bit more color on that, too.
Yeah, let me just kind of clarify what's going on here. The annual date change bill is a thing because the NAIC is a non-governmental entity. And when they promulgate something, when they say this is what you should use, we can't just say that in Kansas, we're gonna use what the NAIC uses because they're not an entity of Kansas. We can pass legislation because it's a bicameral process and then presented for approval to the governor. The only way to get around that, or the easiest way apparently 31 years ago, was to just change the date, have the committee sign off on the bill, goes to the floor, and it's just a formality. That, again, the date itself is kind of a formality from the NAIC to say, okay, every year we just up the year one. So it became a formality for us. I don't think that any of the documents or instructions that the NAIC is promulgating in this case, if you read the bill, you saw the framework for this and the stress test for that and these calculations and those instructions. It's not something that the state can really determine on its own. That all comes from the accreditation agency. But again, we can't just enact that. So by giving the commissioner the authority to say, okay, we're picking this version and then we're going to publish that in the Kansas Register, we're noticing the public, and by enacting the statute, you're giving her the authority, so it's still not an unlawful delegation. There's an interim step between the NAIC and the public. The problem is that if we were to just go with what the NAIC said, it would be unconstitutional.
That was exceptional. I actually understood and everything. It was
It's almost like I went to law school.
Yeah, I'm not reading that bill, so I'm glad you did, so that's great.
All right, further questions for the lone proponent? Seeing none, all right. I have no one else listed as a proponent for HB 2128. Would anyone care to speak as a proponent? Seeing none, I'll close proponent testimony, open neutral testimony. I have no one listed. If someone would like to speak as a neutral party to 2128, that would be a wonderful time. Seeing none, close neutral testimony for 2128, open opponent testimony for 2128. I have none listed. I'm sorry? Oh, there you go. I understand. Eileen is on record as saying she opposes this bill because she really likes drafting the date change bill every year. Oh, that's special. I do like kind of voting on it, too. Exactly. The one bill, the one that we passed, that we know we understand. All right, I'll close opponent testimony on HB 2128, close the hearing on HB 2128. Committee, we will be meeting next week, starting on Monday. You'll see that it currently says action on bills previously heard. This will be one of them, but stay tuned because there are some other ones getting put into our committee. We're going to start having hearings on those. We're going to have to hurry to get those under the wire. I do want to make a note, however, one sec here, I got to pull it up, of an RS change for the name change bill. The RS was 0616. That is no longer accurate. It crashed the system with this name change. This name change to the name that he's using currently, and that's very strange to me. But the new RS number is 1172, and Eric's not paying attention to me at all, and that's fantastic. The new RS number is 1172 on the name change bill, changing it to the name that Eric continues to use, Department of Insurance, because KDOI is far more attractive than KID. Anywho. Yeah, that wasn't in the text message. I made that one up on the fly. All right. However, until Monday, ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned.